Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I knew a pastor once who imagined taking Paul to a baseball game. He imagined that for an inning or two, St. Paul would be interested in learning about the game and how it was played. But then this pastor imagined that by about the third inning, Paul would have taken notice of the crowd, and from that point on, the game would be forgotten as he worked the crowd, telling them about Jesus. The pastor's point was that the news of Jesus and his compassion for others, that they needed the news of Jesus, was so compelling for Paul that he had to tell them no matter what else was going on. Then the pastor invited his hearers to live in that same enthusiasm for Christ. That's the sense you get from Paul at about this point in his life. This week we are piecing together in chronological order the whole story of St. Paul, and by the conclusion of yesterday, we had finished going along on Paul's first missionary journey and how at the end Paul dedicated himself to giving the news of Jesus not to the Jews alone, but also to Gentiles. This was a radical new approach, and not everyone was happy about it. Paul's outreach to the Gentiles was not welcomed by the traditionalists, and so they held a big meeting about it all in the year 49. The meeting was called the Jerusalem Council, and Paul was invited down to defend his position. He brought some others with him from Antioch, including a young Christian named Timothy. Put bluntly, the traditionalists were saying that every new Christian needed to be circumcised first, in effect, making them a Jew. As you might imagine, circumcision for an adult male would somewhat discourage people from the faith. So, as they debated, they ate together, worshipped together, and so on, until eventually Paul revealed that they had done all this with Timothy and accepted him completely, and he was an uncircumcised Christian. And so it was decided that Gentiles could become Christians. It was further decided that Peter's primary mission would be to the Jews, and Paul would spearhead the effort to the Gentiles. Oh, if only it were that clean and clear. You see, people don't change their views that easily, and not long after this, Peter came for a visit to Antioch and was eating and drinking with Gentile Christians until suddenly a group of men from the Jerusalem church arrived, and Peter withdrew from the Gentiles because of what this new group would think. Well, Paul didn't mince his words and called Peter out about it. Either this is right or it's not. Well, the outcome of all this is unclear. Paul never claims victory. Barnabas sided with Peter, and not long after this, Paul left Antioch and never returned. The status quo remained unchanged. Peter preached to the Jews, Paul to the Gentiles. I do need to say that whenever Paul entered a new city and began to preach, he always started with the Jews at the synagogue. Typically, he was rejected, and then he would take his message to the Gentiles of the town. After all this, Paul began his second missionary journey, but not with Barnabas. Perhaps there were hurt feelings over Barnabas siding with Peter. We don't know. What is certain is that John Mark wanted to go along on this journey too, but after he had left them on the first journey, Paul wouldn't hear of it. Barnabas wanted to take John Mark along, and he and Paul had sharp words about it, and they parted ways. The church at Antioch commissioned Silas to go with Paul from then on. On this second missionary journey, Paul and Silas returned to Asia Minor, but Paul then had a vision of a man from Macedonia urging him to come there, and so they set sail for Greece. In the city of Philippi, Paul cast a demon out of a young girl. This demon had given her the ability to divine the future, and since she now couldn't continue that with the demon gone, those who were making money off of her had Paul and Silas arrested. While they were in jail, there was an earthquake, and the gates were opened, but Paul and Silas and the other prisoners did not flee, and the jailer was converted. Paul and Silas then moved on, eventually coming to Athens, where Paul preached a sermon about how they worshiped an unknown God, and now Paul was declaring that this unknown God was the one who had sent Jesus to save them. They traveled on through Greece, eventually coming to Corinth, and that's where we will leave this story for today. Except for this. Seeing how bold Paul was in his faith, do we have the courage of our conviction? Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.